Good morning. Oh, how can you sleep when you get this to look forward to the next day? Oh my gosh. But I did. I told someone this morning, I had a solid 4 hours. It was excellent. Thank you so much, Joel. And if you get a chance today to talk to Anna Kerr or Beth Becker, they are the most amazing prayer warriors. Anna has changed my life. I had to put a picture of her right on my desk to remember I want to be a praying woman like Anna. So she's a rich, wonderful woman to talk to, and I'm glad that they're here this morning. Thank you. We have seats in front. If anybody wants to move forward, there are plenty of seats in the front here. You will see me really close up, so you may not want that, but that's okay. And last night, I forgot to tell you, in your bags, and there are gift bags in back if you haven't gotten one, there is a red wristband. It says 90028, the world's most influential zip code. If you want to wear those wristbands while you're here and you're going on your prayer tours, people may go, what's that? So go ahead and wear those or bring them home and wear them at home, and people can ask you, what is that for? Okay, so that's a great way to get people to know you're praying for Hollywood. All right, so we are starting. This is for the panel, isn't it? I don't need 2 mics. Okay, I am very excited. I got 2 greetings, one from our local prayer director in Orlando saying that they have a group praying for us this morning. Isn't that exciting? San Jose, New York City, many people have called in, and I just am so excited to tell you that. It's very great. And our friend Daniel in Nigeria sent me an opening prayer for today, okay? Oh, I love him. Okay. Oh God, let's just go in prayer. Oh God, I thank you for this gathering at the heart of a city strategic to the American nation and the world. I decree that as your sons and daughters seek your face using the entertainment world, they will find you. Lord, this gathering will glorify you. It will do your bidding, expand your kingdom, and every deliberation will please you. I pray for journey mercies for all the attendees and the hosts. I also ask that this will be a positive kingdom turning point in the people's attitude to the entertainment world, Hollywood, America, and the nations of the world. Your kingdom come, your will be done. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so I want to start today, and first of all, for all of you who have heard me before, you can just be in prayer, okay? The rest of you, I want to get you excited about what my husband and I, which, by the way, I just saw him. Jim, raise your hand in the back. These are Christians. I am so sorry. How many days have we been married? 11,168. Yes. And so you're not all distracted for the rest of the time. That's 30 years and 4 months, okay? You feel better about that. Okay. Isn't that great? Okay. So, back to business. What I want to give you this morning is a very quick overview of how we look at Hollywood as Christians here. The good news is we know of over 10,000 committed believers working in the entertainment industry. People in all areas of film, television, music, network news, video games, internet projects. It's full of Christians, and those are the only ones we know. And honestly, Christians keep finding and meeting more people every day. This is a place where God is already moving. And he's moving because people years ago started praying. But as more people pray, we'll see much more happen. Our absolute dream and prayer is that Christians will be so visible in Hollywood that everyone around us asks, why? Tell me, what is he? Who is he? I want it. We are seeing a movement of the Jewish community wanting to find their Messiah. It's incredible. When we have our pastors panel, one of the pastors is a young lady who started a church of young entertainment professionals and doesn't have a building, and they were welcomed in by a Jewish rabbi, and they meet in a temple for their Christian services. It's fabulous. So there is great news about what's going on. We have 15 active ministries in the bags that we gave you. Look through and pray. There's a multi-ministry brochure. These are Christians who are pouring into our city, and it'd be great to have prayer for them. You'll meet them some of them in a ministry panel as well. But the reason why I believe that we're seeing growth is, first of all, it has to start with the foundation of prayer. And second of all, we need unity amongst the Christians. And we are seeing that happening. We're seeing the leaders getting together. There's a movement of leaders in ministry reaching out to the church leaders and saying, let's work in partnership. We're growing. You'll meet some pastors as well here who are committed to be in partnership with the entertainment industry. It's what God wants, and we're seeing it happen. It's very, very exciting here. The result of that is the content of films. You can't change the content of films and television until you change the hearts of the people creating it. So we're starting with the people. And as we pour our love and Jesus' love into these people, then they change. Then their content changes. There's a story of a gentleman who was a network news executive, network TV executive, and he was working on a script for a new sitcom. And a friend who's a Christian had been coming in and sharing his faith with him, and this executive had just become a new Christian. So my friend went in to follow up with him, and he was on the phone, and he threw the script to my friend and said, read this. And he finished his phone call, and my friend looked at the script, and there was just red marks everywhere on it. So when the executive got off the phone, my friend said, well, why did you give me this? He goes, oh, ever since I became a Christian, I can't do this stuff anymore. And that's what happens. That's why we want the focus to be on people. The projects will change. Television will get better. There are great shows. There's a new show by a dear friend of ours, Martha Williamson, now called Signed, Sealed, Delivered. Great show. Wonderful shows like that on the air. There are many films coming out because it's the heart of the people changing. So that's where we want our focus of prayer to be. God will take care of the content. Once you become a Christian, you can't do that anymore. That's the key. So that's what we want to excite you about today. What I want to start with is to show you a 6-minute DVD. I don't know whether you saw it on the website, but it just shows why the message we want to let Christians know about what's really going on in Hollywood. So if we can start that DVD, that'd be great.
We are here. We are a community, and we are growing every day. But we need your prayers. Don't fall for the myths.
I think a lot of people would say that God is not present in Hollywood. I've been here 25 years, and I can assure you that He is present.
God is everywhere. That would include Hollywood. When I started my career, it really was a calling in my heart. And most people I talk to in the industry who are Christians say the same thing. You've been given gifts, you must use them. Those are God-given gifts. So yes, He's here.
It's important that Christians are here in Hollywood, because if we're not here, we leave this void, we leave this hole, and we can't expect people who don't know Jesus to act like they know Jesus. So our role as Christians in Hollywood, and why we need more Christians to come to Hollywood, is to help people understand who He is, to introduce people to Jesus.
I just feel like for too long that Christians have stood in judgment over Hollywood. And instead of really having God's heart for it and seeing it really more like Nineveh than Sodom and Gomorrah.
There's still kind of this wall of people that aren't yet praying for Hollywood. I think we need more people to do it in order for God to say, okay, now that my people are supporting this, I'm going to do the action that I've been wanting to do for a long time.
I'm Karen Covell, a producer and the founding director of the Hollywood Prayer Network. Hollywood Prayer Network was launched in 2001 after realizing that Hollywood entertainment industry is a mission field. And Christians can get involved in impacting this mission field through prayer. We mobilize prayer around the world for the people, the projects, and the issues of entertainment executives, professionals, and creative community. And through those prayers, God is invited in to change hearts, to change content, to change lives. And the lives changed in Hollywood will change the world.
Most important thing that I see that is happening out here in Hollywood is seeing Christians that are really passionate about filmmaking and excellent in their craft, but they're also passionate about being a light and not just coming out here to do a good job, but they're also falling more and more in love with Jesus.
I don't know that it's the job of any TV series or a film to convert somebody. It is the job of culture and media to create a context for meaningful conversation.
Hollywood's important for Christians to be involved because of storytelling, being salt and light, being people that actually treat people with respect and pay people a fair wage, deal with people as good employers and good partners. That speaks a lot about your off-camera faith.
The difference that we can make here, because Hollywood is such an influencer, is not just the product that we turn out, but it is being a Christian in the writer's room, on the sound stage, at all of the networks and the studios, being a Christian and showing them what a Christian is like.
The more that we as Christian professionals and people in the industry can speak out and say, look, I'm a Christian working in this business, it's a business we can make a huge difference in, then I think that will help people on the outside understand more where we're coming from.
I absolutely feel like Hollywood is my mission field. I'm from the Midwest, and they had certain ideas about things that were going on in Hollywood and whether or not it's a good idea to pursue art here. And I'm pleasantly surprised to find out that it is the perfect place to pursue both ministry and art.
I think Hollywood is so influential because they are culture creators. Terms we all use, clothes we wear, places we like to visit are very influenced by the movies and television that are made right here.
Hollywood is definitely a mission field like any other. We have our own language, we're our own tribe, we're our own culture.
There are a lot of people here that are hungry, that are seeking, more so than any other place I've ever been. And so we need prayer. Hollywood needs prayer. Christians and non-believers alike need prayer.
It's important to pray for Hollywood because there's so many external pressures. Whatever problems you're having in your life, they're heightened here in Hollywood.
I've actually been on the set where I would have not assumed anybody there was a Christian. And somebody on the crew said, well, could we pray before we started? Prayer has a remarkable impact here in this town.
People should pray for Hollywood if they want to see a change in content, if they want to see a revival.
I think we need to pray for Hollywood because I think that Hollywood is a redeemable place full of redeemable people.
Having somebody praying for us through the Hollywood Prayer Network is like having somebody on the shore throw you a lifeline.
The Hollywood Prayer Network needs your help. Your time, your resources, your prayers are needed so that you can be a part of what God's doing in the entertainment industry. We truly believe that praying for Hollywood will not only change culture, but will change the world.
Sometimes it feels really lonely out here. And to know that there are people out there that are thinking of us and praying for us and supporting us in what we're doing as Christians in this community, it's really, really important, and it makes such a huge difference.
Deanne, I forgot my remote, so you guys will have to do it for me. Okay, is that good? Okay, thank you. I'm going to show you kind of a little view of what some people think of Hollywood. There is a cartoon that Jim and I found in the LA Times, and we're going to go to that next slide. Keep going. There we go. Okay, this is a cartoon with a daisy. The next daisy is he loves me, he loves me. Oh, you're so good, thank you. Oh, look, now I have two. I'll do it double-handed. Okay, second one, the romantic daisy. He loves me not. And then there's, when I press the button, the Hollywood daisy. I love me a lot. We are kind of known as a narcissistic culture. And I'll tell you why, okay? This was a great revelation. If you are a creative person or you know creative people, I have 3 of them in my home. I have a composer husband and I have 2 young filmmakers. First of all, they're all guys, so that's a whole other story. But they're so creative. There's things going on in their head. They create stories. They look at things visually. A friend of ours is a director of photography, and he'll walk in a room and see the light come through the window in a certain way and go, oh, that's beautiful. We just think differently. And so what happens is if you don't know the Lord and you don't realize there are other people out there, that we are living for others, our life becomes right here. And we get a bad reputation for it. So that's something to pray for, that they can look beyond what's going on in their brain and everything they're creating and the visuals and the stories, and they can see people out there. And you know what? The Christians need those prayers too, because we forget and we get in our head, we get desperate for work, we get impassioned by an idea, and we forget there's someone there right next to us who needs something. So that's a great prayer request for us. We also have, this is an interesting thing we realized through I have this now. I have 2 of them. What the heck? Okay, here we go. Very interesting. Oh, there it is. Okay, Noah's Ark, 2 of every kind, sloths, tarsiers, and film school students. They just aren't like the business students. They aren't like the accountants. My son is a film school student, and he's at USC Film School, and he's like, they're weird. Those people are strange. So it's just a part of culture that God knew was necessary. And here's the interesting thing. When there is a country taken over by dictators, socialists, communists, fascists, do you know every single one does the same thing? The first thing they do is they get rid of religion and art. They close the churches, they close the museums, they close the theaters. They know that the power of God and the power of creativity is something they can't control, and so they want to get rid of it. It's very important in culture. If you've gone to really dark countries and you see they're gray, they don't have art, they don't have beauty. You see a healthy country has flowers and has music and has theater and has film. It's a celebration of humanity for the arts. And God knows that, and that's why the artist is important. After 9/11, Whoopi Goldberg went through a real crisis of her life. She felt like, what is my purpose? All I do is make people laugh. There are people saving lives. She looked at the firemen and she looked at the people saving everybody in the Twin Towers. And in 6 months, she finally realized, no, I have a purpose. I make people laugh. That's important. It's important to have entertainers in our lives. What do we do in wartime? The biggest business that grows are the movie theaters. People need to go and get entertainment. They need to have something fill up their heart besides darkness and depression and fear and worry. So art is so important. If you go into a beautiful big white room with nothing on the walls, it's very drab. If you go in with photos or artwork or beauty, even somebody putting together the plants, a beautiful meal that someone creates, that's artwork. That's God creating something through people. And that's something we need to celebrate and appreciate. We may not understand the mind of an artist, and that's okay, I don't either. But we can know that they're important in our culture, and we can pray for them. The arts is one of the hardest businesses to make a living in our country. In LA, the Screen Actors Guild is the union where actors get to the point where they can actually be professional enough to get in the union. 98% of the people in the Screen Actors Guild cannot make an annual living. They have to be a waitress. They have to go do some other job. Only 2% of the actors in LA are making an annual living at it. Now, the papers show us all these rich people, all these famous celebrities. That's less than 1% of the people that are out here trying to make a living. Most of the people who we work with are people we're trying to help figure out how they can pay their rent. We have people that can't go to therapists because they're so depressed, but they don't have money. They don't know where to turn. We don't have enough pastors for people to turn to say, I need help. I know I'm called out here, but I can't make it. We don't have the support of the creative community that we need. And we don't get that information when we're looking at the trade papers, when we're looking at the newspapers, when we're hearing about Angelina and Brad Pitt. We don't realize what a small percentage of our community are those kind of people. So it's just a reminder to know the struggle that goes on. And what the enemy does is he attacks us in ways that are not drugs, sex, and rock and roll. He gets us with loneliness, depression, and despair. And that's where people are dying in Hollywood. That's where the prayers are needed. People who have given up hope. People who truly believe this was something they were created to do. And when they can't make a living at it, they don't know what else to do. They don't know where to turn. They're not equipped to do anything else. And they don't have a support system of people to help them to do that. So that's a prayer to lift up the people in our community, for them to know what they're doing, how to do it, and how to survive doing it, how to thrive doing it. We don't want a whole city full of just survivors. We want a city full of active, abundant life people who just know that they're right where they're supposed to be and God is filling them up every day. That's the prayer. We also have an interesting article that shows that Hollywood is a tribe. This is my church. Do you know that the cinema is the church of today? That the Sunday school is television? And that the hymns that we play are on our iPods? The culture is what's shaping our religion, our faith, our philosophy of life. Young people are getting more out of the media than they're getting out of church, getting out of even family relationships. So it's such an incredible influence that we need to be aware of that. I want to do something now. This is the tribe of Hollywood. We realized that was a mission field. I want to compare our mission field to the Maasai tribe in Africa. And I do this to show you that this is a hidden peoples group here. This is a tribe of people, even though it's in America, it has the same needs as the people that we're sending missionaries out to in Africa and India and China, Asia, all around the world. This is Mr. and Mrs. Maasai. Our friends Lisa and Byron moved from LA. They are the cutest blonde surfers you've ever seen, moving straight to the Maasai tribe. And they met Mr. and Mrs. Maasai, and they realized they have their own language that they speak. They have their own dress. You like the blue suede shoes on the bottom? They have their own culture, their own traditions. Do you know that in the Maasai tribe, when a boy turns 16, in order to become a man, they have a ceremony with public circumcisions? My friend had to go through that and just close her eyes and know, I am not here to change the activities. I'm here to let the hearts be free. There are things that go on in Hollywood that we don't like and we go, ugh, to as well. But we can't judge those things. We have to know that that's a part of the culture, and that when we change the hearts, then the traditions will change. Then the culture will change. So we don't get mad at Maasai tribe. We can't get mad at Hollywood. People only do what they know. And this tribe only knows certain ways to survive. There is a much higher percentage of people coming to the arts from broken families than there are other businesses. People come here to find affirmation. They come here to try to feel important. It's a bigger drug than going to Las Vegas to gamble, because they want to feel like they're somebody. And what do? They come to the entertainment industry, which is the most rejection you can ever find anywhere. You can go to 100 auditions and be told no before you go to one where they go, maybe. That's the life. And yet, that's where people come. They want their name on the screen. They want to feel like they're leaving something behind. At least I made a movie. I did something with my life. I don't have a family. I lost my wife and children. I know I drink and take drugs, but I made a movie. It's something for them to leave behind. And that's what attracts a lot of the people here. So they learned, the Maasai tribe is like that they're their own culture, but they love those people anyway. Mr. Maasai may have 2 or 3 wives, but that's accepted in their culture. That's okay. And then there's Mr. and Mrs. Hollywood. Now, Mr. Hollywood may have 2 or 3 wives too, but it's just one at a time. There are a lot of marriages and divorce, and they're with a lot of the same people. We have their own language. If you read the Hollywood Reporter or the Daily Variety, it's languages that we don't speak. It's vidpics and MOWs and O&Os and overnights and all these terms. It's a language that a Christian has to learn to come into this culture to be able to relate to the people. If somebody on the outside just comes in, it's like a blonde white person going over to the Maasai tribe. You just see, you know the difference. You know that they're not a part of it. We have to learn the language and learn the culture of these people. Then we have the main watering hole in Maasai land. This is where all the people gather. It's the only shade for miles. It's where they have business meetings. The kids play here. The people gather there to get to know each other. And our friend Lisa came. They hung out under that tree to grow relationships. And she one time brought her Bible. And then she kept bringing it. And suddenly somebody said, "What is that?" And she opened it. And they had never seen a Bible before. And she got to explain it. And then weeks later, Lisa's leading Bible studies under the tree. Because she was building relationships. And she was just offering who she was to those people. That's what we do here. We can't count how many people are saved each week, how many new Bible studies are started each month. What we can do is build relationships and one-to-one open up our Bibles, open up our hearts, open up our lives to them. And when they respect us as people, then they listen to what we have to say about God. And it really is. It's like the wonderful Young Life slogan, "Earn the right to be heard." That's what we find in Hollywood. We have to earn the right to be heard here, because it's hurting people, and there's nothing stronger than a weak person defending their weakness. And we know that and have to just take time and love these people. So this is our watering hole. This is the Aroma Cafe in Studio City, right under a tree. There are watering holes all over LA where entertainment people gather. You can go into a Starbucks, and everybody you see with their laptop open is writing a script. You go anywhere here, you watch. You see people talking, they're not catching up, they're pitching a story. You go to any of these watering holes, and that's where you can build relationships with entertainment people. Jerry Bruckheimer, who's the producer of most of the huge movies for years, goes to Aroma Cafe almost every morning and has church. He meets with friends before he goes into the office. People gather in community here, and we have to find where that is and spend time with them. We can't send letters in and tell people how to act. We can't boycott their work, because all they hear is, "You hate me, don't tell me what to do." Boycotting does not help, because here's the interesting thing. People think that Hollywood is run by money, and they think if we boycott, pull back the money, people will change. That's not true. Hollywood is run by worldview. Now, part of the worldview is to make money, but if they have to put their worldview up to your worldview, they'll give up all the money in the world to stick to what they believe. So we have to reach their hearts to change the worldview, not their pocketbooks to change the money. That only gets them angry. So if you can remember, if you're ever tempted to boycott something, stop and just pray. Prayer is letting God come in and do the work, and not us sending a message of hate and judgment. We have a bad reputation here, unfortunately, as Christians. We are right-wing, fundamentalists, finger-pointing, judgmental, homophobic people. And we've kind of lived up to that reputation. And so we, as insiders, try to change that to say, no, we're going to be loving, Christ-like, peaceful, embracing people, and let the Holy Spirit do the work. And that's a lot easier, too. It's a lot harder to start writing all those boycotting letters than it is to pray for God's love to come in and touch these people's hearts. This is the main road in Maasai land. We were there last summer. We had to stop for all this because there are wild animals on the road. There are also malaria. There are thieves. It could be a scary place to live. But when Christians go somewhere, they don't have to worry about that. We had actually some calls for people that didn't want to come to Los Angeles for this gathering because they were afraid it was not safe. And I said, "Did you go to Washington, D.C. last year?" We can't be afraid of anywhere if God has told us to go there. A friend of mine who's a Christian that lives here said, I'm more scared of not obeying God than I am of going somewhere that seems scary. And that is so true. So that's the main road. It may take 7 or 8 hours to get down this road. Byron had to get his tribal, to meet with the tribal chief there. And when he finally got there to get to the tribal chief, he had moved on because the cattle needed better grass. They're a very nomadic group of people. And you just have to go with the flow. Jim changed a song that we live by. Flex and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to flex and obey. It may take 7 or 8 hours to get down the Hollywood freeway, which those of you going to Jeopardy experienced, and to go meet with the tribal chief at the Paramount tribe and find that he's moved on to the Universal tribe or the Sony tribe. We're a very nomadic group of people. That's why people are bad at relationships here, because we keep moving on with the project. You may go out of town for 6 months to do a movie and lose track of people who you may not see again when you come back because they've gone on to something else. We get close to people for a movie, we end, and then there's that drop, and then we have to start again and find another job. The majority of the people here are freelancers, and freelancers mean they don't know what their next job is after they're done with this one. There's a sense of great stress with that. I do not know what it's like to have a 9-to-5 job and get a paycheck. We just don't know. You just start going, well, Lord, I tell you, it gets me to be a stronger believer. I think it's a gift to me that I have to trust him. The best moment of my life was when I realized I need Jesus desperately. And that's right where he wants us. On the hardest days, we know, now he can work. Now he can do something through me. And that's what the Christians do here who don't know what their next job is. They don't know what's coming up. They don't know if the job that they're on is going to last. Jim has a longer list of TV pilots that he's written music for that are in pilot heaven than he does of those that ever made it on the air. Because there are 6,000 scripts that are sent into the Writers Guild every single year to be registered. 300 are made, and about 12 are successful. Jim is a composer in television. You have more of a chance of being a U.S. Senator than you do of being a composer for nighttime television. There are 100 senators. There are 13 composers that are doing all of the nighttime television shows. It is such a small group of people. So many thousands are trying. Thousands of people come off the bus every single day. And very, very few of them ever make it in this business. And many of them get sucked up by other things to try to stay alive, to try to make a living. That's a prayer to have for our people. That those people that get off the bus in Hollywood don't get into drugs, don't get sucked up by Scientology, don't get lost in the shuffle, don't get into prostitution. That they can find a Christian to help them and to bring them along and to either get them going here or lovingly send them back home. We don't know what is best for people, but we know it's one or the other. And that's a hard decision to make as well. So that's our mission field. I had a sign made by a friend of mine that I put up in my office as I walk out the door so that every time I leave my office, I remember, now I'm entering my mission field. That's the kind of mindset we want people to have here. You are on a short-term missions trip. That's what you're on. And you are here on a missions trip in a mission field that needs Jesus, but has people that you can partner with who are already here with you. We mentioned, Oz mentioned last night, I loved it. He said, so is there a William Wilberforce? Oz, there are William Wilberforces in Hollywood. We just need more. I want to know if you know who said this. Give me the screens of the world, and I will control the world. Adolf Hitler knew that if he took over the movie theaters, then he would take over the country. That was his strategy. The gay community, people who I love, broken people who need Jesus, knew that they could get their message out by going into television. Oz mentioned that last night. People know the power of the media. We read that when television came into existence in America, it totally changed the way people voted for president because they saw them and they were charming. Or were they charming? Could they speak well on television or couldn't they? That changed people's view of who should be our nation's leaders. And you see how the last presidents have used television shows to help promote them because they know that they get more mass exposure that way. The media is a key element in all kinds of campaigns, in people trying to advertise things. They know this is where they can reach the people. And Hitler knew that years ago. We also share our faith in Hollywood. We have classes. Jim and I started years ago, and other people do it as well. Our first book was called How to Talk About Jesus Without Freaking Out. And then we decided the young people need something a little hipper, so it's the J-bomb. We want people to know how to share their faith here. And it's not ways that are the same in other places. It's being one-on-one with relationships. We don't even always call ourselves Christians. Jim says, I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm a follower of Jesus, and I have a spirit guide. That's the Trinity right there. And then people ask questions. To do it in a way that's culturally relevant, that someone doesn't go, oh, I know who that is. Oh, never mind. So that's what we do here. I want to end with a story. I was hired as a producer for a TV show called Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer. And I was excited about that. A Christian hired me. They're out of New Jersey, and they had a West Coast office open. And I came on board, and we had our first meeting that day, and we're finding out who we should interview. Headliners and Legends was a show with 1-hour interviews of celebrities. We profiled the person, and like on the Arts and Entertainment Channel, you learn about celebrities that way. And I came to the first meeting, and immediately they started assigning people names that have been accepted. And they said, if you have any names that you'd like to recommend, and I had just read in Newsweek that the #1 most recognized name in the world is Billy Graham. And I thought that was interesting. So I said, I'd love to do a profile on Billy Graham. Well, they looked at me like I had lost my mind and said, he's too old and nobody knows him. So then we start getting assigned names, and there was a gentleman next to me that I didn't know yet, and the executive producer turned to us and said, okay, Karen and Rick, your first name, you will do Hugh Hefner. And I'm like, he's just as old as Billy Graham. And I didn't want to do it. I really didn't want to do it. I thought, I do not want to spend 3 months doing a 1-hour special on the bunnies. This is not what I'm into. So I went home to Jim, and I said, what do? I don't want to do this. And he said, you've got to do this, because if you don't, somebody else will. And you've got to do it differently. And you've got to do it in a way that no one else would think about. And God can be glorified in this somehow. So I went back and I thought, yeah, but there's this Rick guy I'm assigned with. So the next day I walked in and I said, Rick, I have to tell you something. I did not want to do this assignment. And he said, neither did I. And I said, really? What did you do? He said, well, I went home and I called my pastor. I said, you've got to be kidding. Now, of course, my cynicism, what kind of pastor? But he said, I said, what did he say? And he said, you've got to do this, because if you don't do this, somebody else will. And you've got to do it the right way. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think this is a divine appointment. Both Christians, both assigned Hugh Hefner. We decided through prayer and through discussion that we wouldn't celebrate what he's accomplished. We would find out why he became who he is. What made him the man that he is. And in our interviews of his friends and his family, and finally the interview with him, it all laid out clearly. And it taught me a lesson for every single person I meet. Everybody has a story. When we went to the interview, to go to the mansion to interview Hef, I brought all a Christian crew. We had a Christian cameraman and a Christian sound man, and the 4 of us were in a car, and we're driving up to the mansion, and we're praying and praising God. And we get to the mansion, and we stop at this big gate next to a boulder, and suddenly the boulder talks to us. We tell the boulder who we are. The boulder says, okay, and the gate opens. And we drive up to Hugh's house, and on the road up to the mansion are yellow yield signs that say, beware bunnies at play. There are flamingos. There are peacocks. There are beautiful wild birds everywhere. It's beautiful. We get up to the library, which he has designated just for interviews because he averages 1 interview a day. And he has everything set up. Our poor cameraman and sound man did nothing because you put the camera there, you don't change a thing, the lights are there, everything's set up. He has, if you notice, I'll show you a little clip here, he has a picture of himself holding a Raggedy Andy doll. And he has that in all of his interviews. And we came in and sat down. He came in with his entourage. There were some bunnies. I swear there were some hitmen. There were bodyguards. There were PR people. They all come in. We said hello. Everybody was lovely. Hef was wonderful. Just kind, in his smoking jacket. Sat down. Rick asked the first question. Hef, what was it like growing up in your home? And the first answer, well, we believed in God, but we weren't a loving family. He said, my brother and I never heard I love you from our parents, ever. And he said, my mom had a phobia of germs, so she never hugged us or kissed us. She didn't want to give us germs. He said, but they did give me one thing that I loved. They gave me a blanket, and that's what I slept with, what I carried with me, what I got to cuddle, and it was my bunny blanket. It had little bunny rabbits around the outside of the blanket. He loved that blanket. And he said, when I was 7 years old, I got a tumor in my ear, and the doctor said I might lose my hearing. And I had always wanted a puppy, but my mother wouldn't give me one because of the germs. And so when I learned I might lose my hearing, a friend of my mom's called and said, hey, he's going to lose his hearing. Give him a puppy. So my mom broke down, he said, and gave me a puppy in the side of the house she didn't go in. And we set up his little bed, and he said, I gave the puppy my bunny blanket to lay on. And he said, what we didn't know was the puppy was sick, and he died 5 days later. And he looked at us and said, I guess I'm just a little kid still looking for love. When the puppy died, the mother got the puppy away, and then in front of Hugh Hefner, she burned his bunny blanket. He was never the same since then. So he grew up to be a man who needed love. It turned into adolescence, into sex. When he got older, it turned into a business. He's very smart and turned into an empire. And it's all based on brokenness. And I want to show you quickly a little clip of the end of our interview. If you could just turn on that clip.
He set out to live a movie. He created a stage set for that movie. He's living the romantic dramas of the 30s. He has a great and glamorous life.
But the Playboy's life is not complete. Through the years, through his magazine, and through his relationships, Hefner has been on a search for one thing that seems unattainable.
A world where the songs are true. I've spent my life in that quest, looking for that perfect romantic connection where the words of the songs are true.
When the interview was over, there was silence in the room. And nobody wanted to break it until finally his PR person said, well, this wasn't an interview, this was a therapy session. And we all kind of laughed uncomfortably. And then Hef got up and came straight toward us and said, that was my favorite interview. No one's ever asked me questions about me. We were amazed. It was just God using two Christians who didn't want to do it to show up and be faithful. After that, I wrote him a letter, and I said, Hef, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to interview you, to get to know your friends and your family. I said, what I learned for this interview is that you have everything that man says is attainable. But there's one thing I think you haven't experienced. You know a living God, but you've never met a loving God. And I put in there a book by Ravi Zacharias called Can Man Live Without God? And I sent it to him, and I said, thank you very much again. And I thought, I don't need to hear from him, but that's all I know to do. Is just offer him a part of my heart. 2 weeks later, I get a letter back from Hef. Dear Karen, thank you so much. That was one of my favorite interviews. And I appreciate the book. I want you to know I have a faith. It's not one that everybody agrees with, but I will read your book. That's all we can do. And then we pray. And when we pray, God will use whatever is in his life. Since then, I've learned there are other Christians in his life who have given him things. That Christmas, I got a nice Bible. I put his name on it, and I sent it to him as a Christmas present. Got a note back. Thank you for the book. By the way, the people I give Bibles to, they never say thank you for the Bible. They always say thank you for the book or thank you for the gift. I think even that word is powerful. Isn't that something? Then, 6 months later, a friend and I asked a friend of mine to come because Hef was speaking at the TV Academy, and I wanted to just touch base and see how he was. And I didn't expect him to remember me, but I brought my friend, who is an amazing evangelist, by the way. I don't know many like her. Jim says she can talk to a tree. It'll turn into a Christmas tree. So we went to see Hef, and when we were done, Jackie knew a little bit, but not the whole story of what I had gone through. And she went right up to Hef. He came up to us and he said, "One of my favorite interviews, a miracle." And my friend Jackie said, "Hef, I so enjoyed hearing you talk today." But she said, "There's one thing I noticed I don't think you've ever experienced." And he said, "What?" And she said, "Grace." And he looked at her and said, "My mother's name is Grace." Don't ever judge people. Pray for them. Pray for their hearts. Pray for the people you see in the news. And then praise God when things happen that are good steps. We were praying for Angelina and Brad Pitt to get married. Do you know why they got married? Their kids were bugging them. They wanted their parents married. That's God in the heart of a child wanting the right thing. God is working here in strange and mysterious ways. And we're going to show you through the next few days ways that he's working. And I want to thank you ahead of time for being here, for praying. You're going to get to pray for a lot of people. In fact, we're going to have a panel now of industry professionals. And when they're done, if you all would just be willing to pray for all of them, you could change their lives just by the powerful prayers of the saints in this room. So thank you for coming. We're going to just, if you want to just hang in there for a minute, maybe grab a little water, but we're going to switch the chairs and then get started with our panel. Thank you. All right, we have an amazing group of people today. These are industry professionals who are committed to the Lord and excellent at what they do. These are all successful, creative, wonderful people, and the good news is they represent many, many more. You are only getting a sampling of the incredible quality people that we have in Hollywood, and I think these people will help you see that it's really okay to live and work in Hollywood. You can actually raise a family. Our boys love the Lord. Is that cool in Hollywood? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to introduce them, and you guys can come up as I introduce you. Is that good? I'm going to start with the lady. Ladies first, and I'll get out of the way here. And I think, did Josiah make it yet? Daniela? Oh, he's here. Okay, great. Yeah, he's not here yet. Okay, if he's not here, just bring him up when he comes. That's fine. Okay, first, I want to introduce you to Edwina Findley Dickerson. Why did I do that, Edwina? I'm so sorry. Okay, she is an amazing actress. You may have seen her on HBO's The Wire or HBO's Treem, Kelly on Loving You Is Wrong, If Loving You Is Wrong, and she's now HBO's comedy Veep, if you saw that. She was on that. She has been around on many, many television shows, an amazing, beautiful actress, but she's also passionate about a nonprofit that she started called Abundant Life U, where she and her husband, Calvin, pour into thousands of young people in Hollywood to help them be equipped, not only professionally, but spiritually, and to mentor them and to coach them. So as she works as a professional, she's also pouring into the lives of young people. So Edwina Findley Dickerson. And when Josiah comes, you're really going to like him. Okay, but next. Dean Batali, a dear friend, wonderful man. I just have to read what he wrote because everybody, he's so, well, he's going to be mad that I said this. He's so humble. He just writes very little. But he's a television producer, writer known for That 70s Show, What's Up Warthogs, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He started in Christian theater in Seattle, and when they fired him, he moved to Hollywood to work here. So, Dean Batali. Terry Botwick has years of experience as an entertainment executive, as a producer, creating branding of products. He's worked at CBS Entertainment. He's had his own companies. He's currently in a production relationship with Ralph Winter, who couldn't be here today because he's in Australia, called 1019 Entertainment. He has truly been involved in so many areas of producing film and television, both in the Christian and the secular market. He was involved in the whole branding of VeggieTales and planned out the first TV series for that. What do you say? Oh, VeggieTales, yeah.
The Vampire Slayer.
Yeah. We're putting the VeggieTale man next to the That 70s Show man, okay? Is that good? All right, and he recently completed a film that you all have to see if you haven't already, called Captive. It's the true story of Ashley Smith, and it's a beautiful story. Those who saw it the other night, wasn't that exciting? So that will come out, I think, in the spring, hopefully in the spring, so look for Captive. You have to see Terry Botwick. Simon Swart, I love him because he's an executive who's so creative, both sides of the brain are going on at the same time. He's an industry thought leader. Don't you love that? That reminds me of Erwin McManus, who is the lead architect of his church. He's a pastor. How do you like that? So, no, that shows personality. And Simon is from South Africa. He has leveraged technology innovations to transform all kinds of TV show films, partnerships of different companies. He's got many things in the works of how to get producers to work with companies and distribution. He's a big thinker. He propelled franchises, including many recognized brands: Avatar, Titanic, Star Wars, Ice Age, Alvin and the Chipmunks. We'll put Alvin and the Chipmunks next to VeggieTales, okay? Yeah, that's good. And was involved in the Bible and the Son of God. So let's welcome Simon Swart. He is now currently the Senior VP and Manager at Fox Home Entertainment. Then Michael Van Dyke. Oh, we saved the last two. Okay, 2 agents. That's pretty fun. To get 2 Christian agents in the same room is a miracle. Michael Van Dyke has been involved in TV and feature literary work as an agent since 1990. He is a leading agent in bringing faith-based films into the current marketplace. He is recognized at his agency. It's a huge thing to be able to do that. He has staffed over 100 writers, producers, and directors on TV series. Many of the big shows that are on now, he has staffed people to be on. He has been on the front lines for many, many years, so let's welcome Michael Van Dyke. And last but not least is Josiah. Hi, I'm glad you made it. Josiah Akinyil, he took him a long time, he said, to figure out what he wanted to do in life. And so what do? You go to Australia, right? He went to Bible college there, and while he was in Australia, he realized he needed to be in Hollywood in the entertainment industry. So he came back, got involved in an agency called Innovative Artists, and very quickly, within 3 years, he became an agent. He's now an agent as well, working in a large agency and sharing his faith and living his life out as a believer. Let's welcome Josiah. Okay, guys, first thing, why did you decide to work in Hollywood? Anybody want to answer that? You got fired, I know that. He had nowhere else to go, so he came here.
We've all been fired.
They've all been fired.
You know, for me, it was a combination between a dream and a calling. So as a little girl, you know, I dreamt of being a performer, and my mother put me in music and dance and, you know, and creative writing and gymnastics and piano and anything that she thought would nurture the talents of her child, which I just want to applaud all the parents in the room. Are you a parent? Raise your hand. Yeah, amen. I mean, it's really a beautiful thing to be able to recognize your children's gifts at a young age and cultivate them. And then when it was around the time for college, I was praying about, well, should I be a lawyer or should I be an actress, And I've been doing all this studying, all this training. I had traveled all over the world as a singer, dancer, by the time I was 18. And I was like, God, if I really go this way, will you keep me, and will you hold me, and will you lead me, and will you open up doors for me? And he did. And so I'm just grateful that he's, continued to confirm that this is the path that he called me to, as well as the intersection of my own gifts, talents, and abilities.
Oh, that's great. You want to pass the mic?
Well, first of all, I have no other marketable skills. I came to Hollywood 24 years ago because I wanted to see Christian characters represented on film and television. And I had just been fired by a Christian theater company and wanted to see if I could get Christian characters on film and TV. That's what drove me here, and it continues to drive me. We'll talk more today and also on Saturday about my failure in doing that, because mostly what I've written for is vampires and people who smoke pot, which is part of our equation. But I still long to see people represented in film and television who know God.
Dean went to the place that I was going to go first. The Hollywood, someone said, is a business of C students. So, we just kind of wind up out here. Nobody else will have us. But, I grew up just loving television and movies. I remember when I was a kid, my dad would come in. This was in the day, where there was 3 broadcast networks, and, you got your signal over the air. And my dad would come in at 2 in the morning and shut the snow off, on my television, and I'd wake up and go, whoa, 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 I was watching that, But I'm a Jewish kid from New Jersey, and I came to the Lord in 1975, and I first wound up in full-time ministry for a few years, and really distinctly, I heard the Lord direct me one night to say, leave full-time ministry, continue to teach, but work in entertainment. And, I've been trying to dig away to do that ever since.
Well, I ended up working in this industry because I was rejected by the music business. Because I thought that's where I was supposed to go. I was an art student in high school. And growing up in South Africa, my family was very involved in the anti-apartheid movement. So I knew that I was going to have to leave at some point. I did when I was facing 5 years in prison. I elected to take a long-term vacation to the U.S. I'd been to high school in the U.S., so as an art student, I came back from that experience, and I realized that I could not immigrate as an art student, so I shifted my majors to accounting and business. And that's kind of like the closest thing to torture that you can do. Right? And I trusted the process because I knew I could work in any English-speaking country with an accounting and a business degree. But I'll tell you, it was like my Joseph experience, like God had given me a vision for something creative, and I found myself in the dungeon counting pennies. No offense to any accountants out there, but it just wasn't how I was wired. And when I came to the U.S., I worked in public accounting, and everything worked out pretty well. As it was meant to be. And I think I'm evidence that God has a sense of humor, because I'm the unlikeliest person. When I look back and I see what I've been able to do in my career, my vocation as a kid growing up in a beach town in Africa was, I'm humbled by it, and I know God's in it. And through all the letters of rejection from the music companies on the West Coast, all the Christian labels back then, and then the randomness of meeting someone at the beach basically who said, hey, we're looking for someone at Warner Brothers. And that was the beginning for me. And then, and my passion has always been that Christian art would be as good as, if not better than, secular art. And
thank
you. I didn't choose to be in this business. In fact, I don't know if really any of us would have chosen to be in this dark mission field. And my sordid testimony is written up in Jim and Karen Covell's book and Victoria Michael's book, The Day I Met God. In fact, I don't even think I used my name because I didn't want to bring attention to who I was, but the title is Free Fall, and I think that explains it all. I mean, I went to Tulane University. I managed, after Tulane, I moved to Lahaina, Maui, and I managed Chart House restaurants for 3 years in Sun Valley, Idaho, Lahaina, Maui, and San Diego. And when I was in Sun Valley, I wound up moving to Dallas, Texas, and that's a long story that I won't get into. But in Dallas, Texas, in the 80s, I was living a very fast lane lifestyle. And to abbreviate my testimony, I had a Damascus Road experience with the Lord in 1986, followed by, about a year later, a very serious water skiing accident that changed my life. And the Lord used all of those experiences to literally drag me out to Hollywood in 1988. And it was so clear to me that the path was for me to come out here. And when I landed, in his infinite wisdom, he wiped me out and took everything from my life that was material and had me right where he wanted, literally at the bottom, totally and completely dependent upon him. So that's my quick, abbreviated answer. But it's a real blessing. And I always, when I speak to anybody who wants to enter into the entertainment business, I always say this has got to be a calling. I mean, if there's any other motivation, if it's fame or any other motivation, get out of everybody's way. You're wasting your parents' money, our time. It has to be a calling from God, because nothing else will sustain you in this business.
So I came to Hollywood because I felt called to come to Hollywood. I grew up, I'm Nigerian. Hello. Well, I mean, I was born in the U.S., but I was raised in Nigeria. I grew up loving television and film, but it was always so like distant. Like it was like a literal, unreachable, unachievable dream to work in Hollywood. I went to college in D.C. and I was involved with a church in D.C. And while I was there, I really started feeling the stirrings of ministry in my heart, but at the same time, I had the desire to work in entertainment did not go away. For a while, I sort of pressed that down. I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to do that. That's not from the Lord. I'm supposed to be in full-time church ministry, and that's what I was going to pursue. But I came out to, I happened to find this movie guide thing that someone sent to my email, sent to me, and I flew myself out from DC to LA. You don't know this, to volunteer. I'm like, well, let's see what Christians are doing in Hollywood. And I remember Ted Baer spoke about. He had this whole graph about graph about how entertainment impacts the world, and how sometimes the gospel is better preached through the medium of television and film. And I know that my heart was like, wow, this is actually possible. This can be ministry. Entertainment doesn't have to just be a job; it can be ministry. So anyway, I end up in LA, and got a job working at an agency where, for me, it's really about impacting people. I see myself sort of as a pastor, and I get to talk to actors every day. I talk to them through issues. I pray for people, and I also pray about kind of work that they get to do. And I ask God to open doors and close doors, because I don't want them walking into places where they will meet people that will take them on the wrong path. So for me, it's really about being a person of influence, influencing people, influencing creators, and just being in a place where your voice matters. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Josiah represents actors, and Michael represents writers, directors, and producers. And it's two pretty different worlds. A lot of packaging, but it's different worlds. So, yeah. Okay, the next one. Here's a good one to challenge the group. Have you had conversations or experience where you can say that there's something that the church doesn't understand about what you're doing that you'd like to clarify? Have you had a conversation where someone says, why are you there? Or what are you doing? And then you can, what would your response be? Someone go ahead.
Well, I'll do a quick response and then pass it over to you. But I think it's, I think that's really a big subject, Karen. The thing that I've found through the years is that, and hopefully I don't offend anybody by saying this, but there's I think some misconceptions in particularly the evangelical community about entertainment and about media. And I think in some ways it holds us back as an industry. And I have like this whole big soapbox that I won't go into, but I actually think it may even date back to the Protestant Reformation, where we kind of start worshiping the written word, and we sort of gave up storytelling and some of the other sensory experiences of worship. And if you notice, most of the great directors are Catholic because they're comfortable with mystery. And I think the evangelical church tends to think of entertainment as evangelism, but evangelism is a very personal, interactive experience. But story is great at posing questions, confronting people to think deeply about things, to cause them to change their minds. So I think that's one misconception that I've had dialogue about in the church, is that, you know, movies and television are not evangelism. And the second thing is that I think that we tend to confuse wholesome and biblical. So people tend to look for, you know, non-objectionable content. And, you know, I could make something non-objectionable for parents for their 5-year-old, and it might be wholly offensive to God. Yet, if you authentically portrayed the Bible on film, it would be an R-rated movie. And so I think that we need an education through the church about the power of story, about the authenticity of story, and to try to transform how we interact with the culture because of that.
Well, Terry, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah, you can clap for that. You know, what I was going to say as someone that's in front of the camera is that a lot of times I think Christians have an expectation that the characters that you play, you know, that they are Christian characters, right, or Christian people. And again, that expectation of evangelism in front of the scenes. And I just remember one of my very first TV shows coming out of NYU, and I started working on HBO. And anyone that's ever seen HBO, you know, it's gritty, you know what I'm saying? And so I remember being offered this role, and I really prayed about it, because I'm like, on the front, you know, the characters curse, and, you know, there's different things going on. And I prayed and fasted for 3 days after receiving the role, along with a friend of mine, and we just interceded and just went before God, like, is this what I'm supposed to do? And after 3 days, the Lord revealed to me, he said, I am sending you here. And he said, it's not for your own aggrandizement. He said, there are people there that are waiting to hear from you. And literally by the first day of filming, I was sitting in my trailer, you know, just getting ready, preparing, and someone knocks on the door. And I said, hello, you know, and I opened it up, and it was one of the other actors, you know, on set. And she said, can I come in? I said, sure. And she comes in, and I said something like, maybe, you know, God is good or something like that. And she said, you believe in God? And I said, yes. And she began to pour out her whole life story. She was working as a stripper. She was using drugs. She was in an abusive relationship. I'm like, wow, God, really, day one? Really? And meanwhile, I'm like 21, 22 years old, you know, but that's the blessing of raising your children in the church, you know what I mean, and making sure they're in an environment where they're supported, so that when they come into the world, there is that foundation of ministry. And I'm telling you, you know, where she is now she has 3 children, a husband, she's involved in church. I mean, her life has just completely turned around. And there's so many other stories that I have like that. And so sometimes it's about what's happening behind the scenes that you'll never see when you turn on the TV show. So I just want to encourage you all too to not necessarily judge based upon what you see, because there's a whole unseen realm that we need your prayers for as well.
Yeah. I think you know, being in the church, growing up in the church, I always used to hear about how evil Hollywood was. And I heard that over and over again. And even when I started working at a studio, I would still hear it. And I was looking around, and I'd go, wow, it's not really that evil. like I'm just trying to understand this dynamic, right? So I sort of studied it and really prayed about it, and it's kind of, Hollywood's not evil. There are evil influences. There are as many evil influences in Hollywood as there are in any other industry, whether you're talking pharmaceuticals, energy, banking, a nice current one, I think. You know, where it's, their value system is different, completely different from the church. The church is about ministry and changing lives. Hollywood, most of the companies in Hollywood are public companies. It's all about profit. And by the way, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a really good thing, because going back to making compelling content, you have to make movies that people will go see, right? And I think that's where the Christian community's really struggled, is they've gone for movies that are all message-based. And, you know, I think we've got to appeal to universal values. I think Dean touched on it in his earlier comment about reflecting, you know, strong characters, and not beating people over the head with the 2x4 of the message, the message, the message. There's enough common values that get people pushed in the right direction. And I think you do it in a way. My thing as a believer early on was I used to really get annoyed at the whitewashed Jesus that was always presented in movies, right? He was completely inoffensive. He never raised his voice. He was really calm and he was really mellow. And for all intents and purposes, I would use the word boring, okay? Because it's not going to offend anyone. And if you guys, you know, knowing our scriptures, Jesus was anything but that, right? He was a lightning rod. He made people nuts. He had a smile on his face. He was laughing. And you know he had a sense of humor because he did things that, you know, blew people away. And, you know, he drew people to him by attraction. You know, he never forced anyone to follow him. It was just kind of like, and he told stories that were so compelling, and people like afterwards like, what did he mean by that? It's like, you know, what's that all about? You know, and we could take that into our story narratives, right? Instead of telling people the answer, have them guide them in the right direction. And I think you got a broader audience. You know, I've always said this in my experience. Now, we've been in the faith-based space or the faith-friendly space. I mean, there's so many different ways you can call it, and it's really. It's about universal values. You can make movies that are by Christians, for Christians, and they're 2-hour sermons. And yes, you can make a decent amount of money at that. Most studios don't want to be in that business because that's not their core business, right? They don't understand the marketplace. And when you do movies by Christians, for Christians, you've automatically limited your audience. And if you want to have the broadest cultural impact, you've got to go with the broadest value appeal. And that also gives you the biggest basis to actually, you know, be profitable and successful so you can make your next projects. I mean, I do think that there's a need in the marketplace right now for inspirational, aspirational content. There's a reason why some of the recent movies out there have done so well, right? Because they're universal. You can go all the way from Blind Side to, you know, movies like Walk the Line, more, you know, later, King's Speech, etc. These movies are welcomed, and you're not alienating any part of your audience in the process. And I think as Christians, we've got to be more accepting of when creative talent take on Bible stories. You know, Noah's a great example. You know, I've taught Noah so many times in Sunday school when my kids were young. It always fascinated me because we focused on the animals being saved. And it's, I mean, Noah at its core is really a story of genocide, right? So you take that on as a Bible story. It's about God hitting the reset button. It's about judgment, and it's about starting over again, all right? That's a tough story for Sunday school, let alone a secular director taking it on. And it's like, I welcome that. I welcome that dialogue. Let's mine the Old Testament for those R-rated stories. I mean, we've got gladiator stories in the Old Testament that, you know, would pale in comparison to anything we could actually write and create. And I would love to see more of those.
So I did an interview with Charisma Magazine once talking about how I, as a Christian, could be on that 70s show and how I was trying to kind of push against a lot of the content. And in the next issue, somebody had written a letter to the editor saying, how can we praise this guy for using his God-given talents for doing something so destructive? Is compromise now a virtue? God help us all. Praising this man would be like thanking somebody for defecating in my living room. So if you're here, I'm sorry. What people in the church don't understand is those of us who are here, I was at another event, somebody said, well, doesn't it bother you that you're using your gifts for something that's so negative? I said, well, no, it tortures me. Those of us who are here who care about content and wanting to see salt and light in the culture, we really think about this a lot. we push against things a lot. And there's this myth that salt and light can change everything and make it so much better. Sometimes, sometimes all salt does is stop the decay. If you have 2 pieces of meat in front of you and put salt on one and no salt on the other, 3 days later they're all going to be rotten, but the one with salt on it is going to be less rotten than the one that didn't have salt on it. So you have to understand that a lot of us here in Christians, all we're trying to do is stop the decay of stuff. Now, that's not to say that everything is bad, and we'll talk about the goodness, and that's one of the things we as Christians have to do in the body of Christ is find the good and watch the good and promote the good. But sometimes all we're trying to do is push against the decay. And that's what I would try to do on that 70s show, and I'd get tiny grains of salt in there. The Parents Television Council consistently listed that 70s show as one of the 3 worst shows on television in terms of its sexuality and behavioral content. And what we need to understand is that if I hadn't been there, we would have been number 1. Okay? So that's what a lot of us are trying to do, and that's what we need your understanding about. And you can hold us accountable because we do want to be challenged. You can ask us the hard questions because we talk about them a lot. We stay up till late in the morning because we basically work all night. We do it a lot. And so we're struggling it, and we want you to struggle with us.
To be successful, you have to be really good at making money and bringing in successful shows. It's not, you get to work on your passion projects if you're lucky. You get to talk to the people around you about your faith if you're lucky. But to stay employed in this town, you have to be successful at what they're paying you to do. And you have to do it to the best of your abilities. I have to sell every picture Fox creates, and I have to sell it to the best of my abilities. That's the way I stay successful. That's the way we get to shape things we get to acquire faith-based movies and things like that, right? We have to be successful at what we do, and we have to be successful for the companies or the production groups that we work for to continue to influence the space.
I mean, I can talk about this topic for a long, long time. I think it's simple for me. I'm a television packaging agent, so sometimes I'm on the feature side, but we are pioneer missionaries called into a very dark mission field. I'm not a church history expert, but I do know that every time that a mission field was established, blood was shed. And I doubt anybody on this panel is going to be shedding any blood, but I can tell you that if you're called by God to write, produce, agent, lawyer in this business, you will suffer and you will come under extreme attack. As my old mentor Coleman Luck used to say, because of your identity, Michael, in Jesus, in the entertainment business, you're worthy of attack. I read one of 2 spiritual warfare prayers, single space, 5 pages every single day. If you want to pray for us, warfare prayer for us, it's a high calling, but we need your warfare prayers, and we're missionaries, and it's just that simple.
I mean, I think everyone has said it, we're salt and light. We're here to bring Jesus into the world. I mean, some of these people would never, ever darken the doors of a church, but they will hang out with people. I've been in places where I've been with some of people that you guys would recognize their names. They're drunk or they're high, and I've had some of the best conversations about Jesus with some of these people, and it's really amazing when we have guys like these who've Terry and Dean, who've been laying the foundation for people like me, and to make it actually people are a lot more open to talking about God or talking about Jesus when you can get specific. But yeah, salt and light, that's what it's all about. The scripture that Isaiah, he says, arise and shine, for your light has come and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. Gross darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness of people, but the Lord will arise, and the Gentiles will come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of our rising. We are the light of the world. Darkness doesn't go to light, light goes to darkness. you know. So yeah, that's it.
30 years ago, when Jim and I came here, and a lot of you were here then, it was really hard to find a Christian. They came to the point where Jim and I were like, you got to get out of the closet. It's time for Christians to get out of the closet, because they were here, but they were afraid. We knew Christians losing their jobs. We knew that it was a very, very dark experience. I believe a lot has changed in 30 years, but I would love to hear from you all where you think this place is spiritually at this point. What's the spiritual climate? And it may be different answers based on your different parts of the business.
You touched on something about Christians in the entertainment business, especially artists, if they're actors, actresses, and so on. What I've seen over the last 15 years or so is Christians are very particular about who they'll support. And they will insist that the artist fits within the box of what they believe a Christian should, only roles that Christians should take, and the way they should behave, and so on. And we kind of eat people alive. And I think what we have to do, especially for the next generation, I've got a daughter who's about to graduate film school, and I can tell you she has a crazy vision artistically. It'll make every one of us uncomfortable, but I believe it's God-inspired. There's an ethical, there's a vision there, and we have to allow our Christian artists to just speak and just support them and trust that God's in it. Instead of saying, I'll only support you if you fit within this box. And by the same token, if we have people that are non-Christians portraying Christians, if they're gay, lesbian, etc., we should accept that. That's great, it's acting. And you know, you have to trust that God's in that somewhere, as opposed to saying, you'd be amazed, we've had movies that we can't market to the Christian audience, where it's a fundamentally Christian story because it's a non-Christian playing the role. And we've got to knock that stuff off. And we've got to release our artists, right? God puts the vision. If our artists are truly our prophets, and I think they see things and feel things and do things. And by the way, to be an artist, you put it all out there. Everybody has an opinion on the work that you do. The courage to be an actress, a writer, a director is unbelievable, because everybody picks it apart. And it's out there, and it hurts. And it's like we need to be there for our Christian artists and not demand that they conform before we'll support them.
Wow, Simon, that's good. That's good.
I mean, I just want to pick up on that. I completely agree with that. And years ago, my oldest son wanted me to watch this documentary on Tupac Shakur, and I kept thinking, I don't care about Tupac Shakur. And you know, eventually the light bulb went off because I'm a little slow, and I realized, well, if it's important to him, I should probably pay attention to this. And so I watched it, and I learned a few things. The first thing I learned was it was really well made. The second thing I learned was I didn't know anything about Tupac Shakur. I thought I did. And the third thing I learned was I have no idea where he was personally in his faith, but he was, in a sense, a prophet to the culture that he came from, because his songs were all about the injustice of that culture. And he literally was killed for crying out about that from the people who were exploiting that same culture. Well, that's who the Old Testament prophets were. You know, they ran around naked, they wrote songs, they wrote in poetic ways, they did outrageous things, and you know, they built sculptures, they did all these crazy things to try to draw attention to what was burning inside of them. And the other thing about Simon's comment about the artist prophet is that we all grow and evolve also. You know, what I might say to you theologically 35 years ago is very different than something I might say today based upon what I've learned over the years. And that doesn't change the giftedness that somebody had 35 years ago. It's just the lens that they look through at that point in time. And so we need to encourage them, and we need to let them express that voice, because that journey is a journey that we're all on in one way or another, and people identify with it, and we do encourage the journey.
I just love that there's such a spirit of unity here in this room. You know, thank you for coming from all the different places in the country you came from to be here. And thank you so much, Karen, for hosting us all together, because we are all believers and we all are serving, you know, one God in our various forms, as Peter says. You know, in my spirit as they were talking, because this is just wonderful, you know, I was just thinking about, there's not such a dichotomy. I mean, there's people here that are in the educational arena, right, or in the political arena, or different. We all have different jobs in different industries, and you can look at the industry and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what's happening. Even in ministry, we don't want to talk about it, but there's some things going on in ministry. It's like, oh Lord, please help us. Help us. You know, but we are all seeds and we're all lights playing our role and doing the very best we can. And we are hoping that we have the support and encouragement from everybody. You know, I think some of the things that we see, you know, to your question, Karen, I know as far as my millennial generation, you know, I think that the rise of social media, reality shows, you know, there's a lot going on spiritually here. You know, on one side, there's this incredible Christian world here, like, you know, the people that are represented on this panel who love God and like Dean said, you know, stay up all night. We stay up all night, y'all. We call each other, text each other, you know, it's like, this is happening. How can we bring Jesus? How can we bring more of Jesus? You know, and then there's the other things that kind of distract us and pull us away. You know, as a young person myself, I mean, things like, you know, social media and this and that, and there's so many voices kind of competing for your attention. And I find that sometimes it becomes even harder to just remain in a consecrated place where there's so many voices and so much noise and like Simon was sharing and others, that what we do then is blasted. It's funny, like I just got off a plane from DC, and right before DC was New York, and I was there doing press for the new series I'm working on, and I'm telling you, I had just landed, and as soon as I landed, all over the radio were all these stories about people I'm friends with here in LA in the industry. And they're like, oh, such and such, you know, it's just revealed that such and such is having a baby, and such got caught up in the iCloud scheme, and such, you know, and the new pictures, all these. I'm like, oh no. And I'm learning more about people that I have intimate relationships with in blogs and in radio, you know what I'm saying, and on TV and daytime, whatever, than like this intimate group right here. And so, you know, when you talk about what's happening spiritually, I think there's so many layers of it. There's so many layers. And I just pray that as you hear about things, you know, through mass media, as you hear about things, you know, this producer or this director or this actress, pray. You know, like the Lord had to reveal to me, pray, don't judge. Because a lot of times the first thing we say is, I knew it. I knew there was something going on, you know. And we can just immediately start criticizing, immediately start judging, immediately start writing people off. But guess what? Some of the things that I was hearing in New York on the radio are things that people sat and confided with me in private and said, I am struggling. Pray for me. So when you hear your business out, you know, in mass media, just remember that privately, that there are private lives, very vulnerable lives that are happening here, and we need that intercession, because people really want to you know, turn their lives around, and if our Christian community is throwing stones too, you know, it's really hard to get to that next place spiritually.
That's really good. I just wanted to add, you know, to I know you know, the media, you know, is very, very key in framing like what people read. Like I know a lot of people read the Inquirer, they read TMZ, they read all this gossip blogs, which also impacts like how we perceive people, and those sites and, you know, those sites, those websites, those magazines contaminate like our spirits and affect how we respond to people. So like I don't go to TMZ. I don't read any of these magazines just because, hey, I know people. I know myself. I know what I struggle with. I know who's praying with me. I know, you know, what God is dealing in my life. I know where I've come from, and I know where I am today. And I also know that for a lot of other people who some of these people will talk about and know they don't know a single thing about their journey. And it's very important to avoid reading like gossip magazines or, because I believe it actually adds to the darkness, and it adds to, instead of people feeling like an onslaught of prayer, prayer from or strengthened prayer from around the world, what they're feeling is judgment, condemnation, which only adds to the burden that they're already feeling and what they're already going through, and it just makes it, people just go deeper into depression and into drugs and into all this stuff. And so it's really important, whenever we see stuff on the television, take a minute to just pray and ask Jesus to invade this person's space, to bring comfort. The Holy Spirit would minister to what's going on in their life, and for God to put somebody in their world who can speak and bring comfort or bring healing. It's such an important thing, because this place is a very hard place to live in. It's very hard to live here. It's a great place to live, but it's a very hard place to live because, if you don't have, there's just so much pressure. There's pressure to perform. There's pressure to be successful. There's just so much pressure in this town. But thank God, for I believe, where sin abounds, grace abounds yet more. And I believe, that God is in the darkest place. That is really the most primed place for God to do something great and to bring revival and to bring renewal. And LA has such a great history. I mean, Azusa Street, happened here. It's this. Catherine Coleman, she was here in LA. She impacted the industry. And so that could happen again. That's what Amy Simple McPherson, she came out of here too. So there's such a rich culture that we call on. For God to come to bring His power and His light, Anyway, yeah. So that's it.
I can answer your question in one or two words, and it's now and right now. The Lord has sustained all of us for such a time as this, and I have begged God to deliver me from the tyranny of being in this media mission field if He is not going to be about His business. And He has sustained me for 24 years, and I have felt like a sleeper cell. And I can tell you from what I see just standing on the front line, there is a revival that is going to happen in these end times, and it's going to be through media, and it's happening right now. And that's it.
I thought I had something to say, but I'm not following that. But yeah. No, I think that the one thing I want to say about the culture is, this is a long-term proposition. And again, I want to go back to that comment I made about the difference between wholesome and biblical, because people think it's something about living in a Leave It to Beaver world. But the Bible, the times of the Bible weren't that way either, and where God shows up in miraculous ways is not that way. And I think that the one thing I'm concerned about is that we make the mistake that because there's been some success with some faith-based content, because as Simon said, the people at the studios, at the networks, they're in service to corporate profit, and that we make the mistake that content about issues of faith designed for people of faith, that somehow has changed Hollywood. And that's not true. And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with the church edifying itself by telling itself stories. It's all great. But who do we want to communicate to? My pendulum is swung over the years to thinking we need to all, somehow put together some kind of a company of Christians that can do a certain kind of content, to thinking it shouldn't be anything like that. We should be, like George Bush Sr. said, 1,000 points of light. All of us just working in the industry, impacting people. And because the culture changes because people change. And people change through interpersonal relationships. Stories can change people. In fact, scientifically, it's been proven the #1 way to change somebody's mind is through story. But I don't think it's about, I think we have to be careful about what the view is of the culture we want to be in. We need to be, we succeed when I'm just as happy to see Simon succeed, even if I don't. And I think that that's the culture change that we're after, not just, is the gospel message in something on video.
I'm going to be, I'm not known for being an optimist. Karen and Jim, 30 years ago, put a prayer group together and started praying that God would send other Christians to Hollywood. And a few years later, I showed up, so they should have been more specific.
Oh, Lord!
But there are a lot of young Christians now that a lot of us mentor and guide along. A couple years, 10 years ago, I'd try to keep track of all the Christian writers who I knew were on television shows, and there were maybe 3 or 4, because I was always the only Christian on every show that I've ever worked on. And now we've lost count. I could name about a dozen shows right now where there's one Christian writer, and on some shows there's 2. And 3 years ago, there was a show called The Playboy Club on, and Christians boycotted it and cried against it. There were 3 Christians on that staff. Imagine, the story that Karen told, imagine if that show had stayed on the air and what that show might have become with those 3 Christians influencing that story. So we do have to understand, yes, there's a new marketing ploy. Basically right now, I agree with Michael to a certain extent that a revival can happen, but Christians are a marketing group to Hollywood right now. So they're going to make films for the church, so that's a fine thing. It's okay to preach to the choir, because a lot of times the choir needs to be preached to. But I think what's going to circle up is that when we have a Christian in this room praying for people and loving people and trying to influence these stories just a little bit, that's how we're going to kind of inch culture along, and it is a very slow process. Somewhere out there, they're the teenagers who have an interest in media. They need to be supported by their church. They need to be prayed for. They need to be encouraged to go to college and learn about film and television and media, because they're going to become the network executives and studio executives that are then green-lighting movies, in addition to loving people in the name of Christ along the way. So you get a twofer if you support them.
I want the last question to be, if you can tell a story about how your faith made a change in your work somehow. You were up against a wall, decision had to be made, a person walked into your life, how you show your faith alive in your work.
That's good. I'll try to keep this really short. But not long again after I came out of school, I was working on different shows. I was, doing a lot of theater, and I was recurring on TV, and I had just been offered a screen test for this big series, and I was so excited. Of course, I'm like, God, wow, you're fulfilling your promises. This is amazing. This is amazing. And so they're offering all this money, and I'm like, wow, confirmation. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and then, so my agent comes, and you all are aware of that process. It's like, okay, I need you to come to the office. We need you to sign the papers. They're putting you on the plane, to screen test in LA. And I was living in New York at the time. Long story short, they're like, oh yeah, and we also need you to sign the nudity clause. I'm like, the what? Oh, it's just standard, it's just standard for the network, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I can't sign this, I can't sign a nudity clause. And they're like, do you understand how much money this is? And they were just really bullies. And sometimes agents can be bullies, but I know you all aren't. And so, but they really bullied me. And I said, I just need to pray. I need some time. I need to take some time. I need to pray. And they said, well, call us first thing in the morning. Like, they're waiting for an answer. They need to book your flight, book your hotel, I'm like, okay. So I just get on the phone and I start calling everybody I knew. And I'm like, can you please help me? What do I do? What do I do? And nobody could tell me what to do. And then finally my last friend, she said, Edwina, you need to get off the phone. Stop asking everybody. You pray. You pray. You pray. You ask God for a revelation. I said, okay, I know you're right. I hung up. And I called one more person. I said, what do you think? And in the middle of it, I got convicted. I said, no, I know. I'm supposed to just get off the phone. I'm supposed to pray. And then it came in my spirit to ask her. I said, can you pray for the director? Can you pray for the producers? I said, because the Bible says that the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he moves it whithersoever he will. I said, so can you intercede for him even as you're interceding for me tonight? And she said, sure, absolutely. Well, the next, I prayed. I went to bed. The next morning, Esther came in my spirit. and particularly the portion when she goes before the king and she says, if I perish, I perish, but I need to see the king. And I knew what the Lord was telling me, and so I reached out to my agent. They're like, okay, Edwina, what did you decide? And I said, I need to speak to the director. And you would have thought I said I want to speak to Barack Obama. Literally, it was like, what do you mean you want to speak to the director? And what are you even going to say, even if he does contact you and he's so busy and he's doing, sessions in LA? And I said, and I'm thinking like, it's just in my spirit, I know this is what God is saying. Well, she says, there's no way, just pass on it. There's no way, this isn't how it works, there's no way. Well, 2 hours later, he calls me. And I just opened my mouth and God gave me the words to say, and he says, you know what? Call your agent back. Let them know what you're willing to do and not do, and I'll see you in LA Monday morning. As far as faith, I'm telling you, since moving to Hollywood, I have been bombarded with prophecies. I can't walk down the street. Literally, I've been in places, with just perfect strangers. They prophesied my marriage. They prophesied my next job. They prophesied what literal geographical location I was just filming in Atlanta. Prophesied all of that. I'd never worked in Atlanta. Prophesied that. Prophesied New York, California. I'm from D.C. But I'm just saying that to say that the guidance of the Lord is so valuable for us here in Hollywood. And I just want to encourage you all too, especially those of you who may have a prophetic anointing or prophetic gift. I have been so ministered to by perfect strangers who've just come up to me and said, God gave me a word for you. I've had people just walk down the street and put a note in my hand and say, God gave me a word for you. And just keep walking here in Hollywood. And so I just want to encourage you too, that if the Lord puts on your spirit, something to share with someone who's working in this territory, by all means, let God use you, because it has significantly affected my life, and I'm pretty sure the people on this panel as well.
With all those prophecies, I just kind of want to walk behind you and pick up some crumbs.
I'll tell a quick story from that 70s show. It's hard not to answer that question by saying, well, I don't really know, because I don't really know how God has used my life with the people that I work with. One of my, I wish I could say, well, people come up to me all the time and say, Dean, you're so full of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and self-control. Why? And sadly, they don't. But we were, and that's mostly my wife. We were doing an episode on that 70s show where Eric and Donna decided they were going to get married, and they decided to stop having sex until they got married. And the part of the story, and I didn't pitch the story, but they were going to go and Kitty, Eric's mom, sent them to a pastor at the church, because that 70s show family was a church-going family, and we did a couple episodes. I pitched and wrote a couple episodes about them going to church. They had some fascinating conversations about God. They were high at the time, but still, there was truth actually being presented on that 70s show. But the writer had written the script, and it wasn't quite right, and the executive producer said, I just want to know what a man of God would tell two teenagers if he wanted them to stop having sex before they got married. And I started scribbling something, and I'm not saying I felt the Holy Spirit working through me or anything, but I knew that I had to say something that didn't have anything to do with God, but had a chance to have complete truth in the statement. And so I said, well, how about if he says, I just think you two are denying yourself that wonderful moment when the bond of your marriage is cemented by giving the gift of yourselves to each other. And the executive producer went, that's it, say that again. So I said it again, and those words went on air exactly. Now, that is one moment in 175 episodes of that 70s show that I worked on. One shimmer of light that breaks through. You can decide if it was worth it to have a Christian there for that one moment, but that's what happened because a Christian was in the room.
I want to relay three things. I'll do it very briefly, but they each represent something different. The first was years ago when I was an executive at CBS, and this place is kind of a fraternity, and you're in the fraternity or you're not in the fraternity. And sometimes based on what we do or don't do, we're either in or we're out. So, when you set the fall schedule, you go to New York and you spend a couple of weeks there, and all the studios are lobbying to get their shows on the air, and the internally, different departments within the network all have their idea of the perfect schedule, and the program, we as programmers have, an idea of what we want to do for the schedule. And so you go and you finally come out with the schedule, and it's a really long, grueling process. And at the end of it, you know, in our case, we'd get up in Carnegie Hall and we'd present all the new shows, and the stars would fly in, and you present all the actors who are going to be in these great new shows. And then you have a lunch for all the advertisers, and then you have a smaller party just for the actors. And, you know, by the end of that day, you're just dragging. And so we're sitting at the end of that, kind of staring at each other, and the head of the network turns to us, and there's, you know, women among us also, and he says, well, let's go to Scores. Well, Scores is a strip club in New York. And so I said, you know, I think I'm kind of tired. I'm just going to go back to the hotel. And in that moment, they look at you and go, you're not in the club. You know, the second thing, also at CBS, right when I got there, there was an opportunity. Someone pitched me the idea of doing a special on the Shroud of Turin, and when they, when the Catholic Church carbon dated the shroud, they took some blood samples from it, and so the idea was there was some DNA testing, and you could never prove it was actually the blood of Jesus, but it gave me a 10-second promo that said, is this the blood of Jesus, to get people to watch. So we did the show, and I could not get it programmed properly to get on the air leading into Easter, and it wound up going on the air on a night that was deadly, you know, where we couldn't get arrested after Easter, and you know, just praying that, you know, this thing would do okay. Well, it went on the air. It actually did extremely well, and I showed up for work the next morning, and, you know, I walked past Les Moonvest's office, and he called out from the office. He looked at me and he said, you dodged a bullet last night. So sometimes you have to be against something, sometimes you got to be for something. And the last thing I just want to say is, on this movie that we just finished, Captive, is a remarkable story. There's the guy whose law firm is doing all the production work on the movie, and he's just you know, he's half Jewish, half Irish, just, you know, New York lawyer, no, you know, particular faith in his life. And he's learning about this story as we're going, and it's given me opportunities to have some great conversation with him. And he calls me one day and he said, you know, I have to tell you this. He said, I had to, as soon as I left my friend's house, I had to get on the phone and call you. And he went to a friend, longtime friend, who was kind of ill, and she was one of the leaders in Nation of Islam. But they had this longtime friendship, and when he got there, he said, listen, I have a gift for you. Don't let me forget, you know, when you leave, I have this gift. Now, those of you who were at the screening, but for those of you who weren't, you know, this was the story of Ashley Smith. This guy, Brian Nichols, broke out of the federal courthouse. He was on trial for rape. He shot and killed a federal judge and a court reporter and 2 other people, and he took her hostage a whole night. And she survived by engaging him, and through the night she read to him excerpts from Purpose Driven Life, and eventually she talked him into letting her go and giving himself up. Well, this guy Jonathan calls me and he said, you know, he spent this whole day with this woman and kind of helping her, and as he's leaving she says, oh yeah, no, I have that gift for you. And she ran and got it, and he opened it up and it was Purpose Driven Life. So, you know, God does amazing things to just open up doors, reach into somebody's life, and give us an opportunity to speak into it.
It's funny, I guess, as believers, you know, we just have to get used to the notion that we're in a minority. And I think we're always meant to be that way. And in terms of being an outsider, it's funny, it's like I actually have a similar story about a strip club that people still repeat at Fox now. Literally, the group was heading off to that club, and I said, no, I'm good, I'm just gonna go to bed. And they said, oh, you're a goody two-shoes, right? Oh, we forgot. And I said, no, actually, I'm not going, you know, for a different reason. They go, what is it? And I go, I enjoy it too much. And they were like, what? And I said, yeah, because I would enjoy it too much, and I really don't see the sense in paying for a steak that I can smell but can't eat. And I'm not capable of making that a judgment. And they talk about that now. It's like, it's kind of funny. And I actually hear other people saying that's why they're not going. It's kind of a... And And I can tell you that level of, that transparency with my coworkers actually helped too, because I was real. I wasn't above it, I was below it. And it's kind of funny, it's like, talk about how my faith shows up at work. It's just like God brings people into my life at the most amazing times. I have Larry Poland, Karen Covell, Oz Hillman, who's in the audience. These are people that didn't know how much they were carrying me. And they were available to me 24/7. It's like I could call them anytime. It was my lifeline. And they would just speak truth straight into my life when I was feeling low. I had a meeting one day, showed up on my books with a guy. It was like 10 years ago. And I said to my assistant, who's this guy I'm meeting with? Because, you know, I want to know what the meeting's about. He goes, I don't know. It's like, why have I had 2 hours blocked to meet with this guy? It's like he was here to pitch a documentary or something. And I'm like, we don't buy documentaries. It's a waste of my time. So I take the meeting and I sit down with the guy in the conference room and I said, look, I don't know why we're having this meeting because we don't buy documentaries. We don't do documentaries. And he goes, okay, well then let's just hang out and talk. So I was like, okay, so what's your documentary about and stuff like that? And it was an angel, basically, for all intents and purposes. He's now a very close friend of mine. And he spoke to me. My wife was going through addiction, alcoholism at the time. He had just ended a marriage going through exactly the same thing. And he ministered to me, counseled me. I got a 2-hour counseling session from a complete stranger who gave me exactly what I needed to hear at the time. And it had nothing to do with the business. And you know, those shots happen if you're open to them, right? And I've learned in my walk is just be open to who God brings into your life and don't question it. It's like, okay, great. It's like, let's go. Let's have that conversation. Let's talk about that. And I feel like, you know, that happened to me just recently. A guy I'd been wanting to have a meeting with and trying to set up a meeting with over the summer. And it was me reaching out to him and getting his contact information. I was having lunch with another friend. I wasn't sure why that lunch was set up, and lo and behold, the guy I needed to meet was there. She brought him along. And it's like, you know, now we have a deal going together. We're getting something off the ground. And it's kind of funny when God's in it, it's really easy. The door's open, and it's like we mustn't lose heart when what we're trying to do doesn't happen exactly when we want it and how we want it, but it'll happen. I mean, I have a vision for a new business model that I believe will change the world. I believe it'll change the world because of the content it'll create and the careers that it'll build. And it'll be a sustainable business model. And I've been a student of film distribution now for over 20 years. In the faith-based space, I've seen kind of what works. I've seen how movies are made. Karen and I have talked about this a little bit. And it's been formed and it's been shaped. And you know, it's kind of funny. It's just as I'm feeling oppressed and crushed by the system, as it were, from political reasons, and my ego gets in the way, and you know, being inside of a major studio, that happens quite a lot. I mean, there's so many times I just wanted to quit, and thankfully with Karen, Oz, and Dr. Poland, it's like it doesn't happen. Okay, I get kind of talked down, and it's like, yeah, keep going, persevere. And now this is starting to happen. It's starting to come together, you know, because I'm praying, God, what's next? All this learning and all this knowledge, this transformation in the business. I see this opportunity, right? I see amazingly talented people not working enough. And it's kind of like, it's not about the content. The content's really important, but it's about the careers that you're building and where those people go on to and what they go on to do after that. And Dean kind of mentioned that. And I think it's now, and I think God's in it. And I think it'll happen. And I'm fearful of it. It's kind of radical, and I'm fearful of it because in the meantime, we've got to pay the bills. In the meantime, we've got to do what needs to be done today to reach for that thing tomorrow, and I believe God will let me know when the time is right to go for it. All right.
I've got a specific example that I'd like to that I'll get to, and I would like to encourage all of you to pray for this once I tell it. I have to give a little bit of a backstory. As I mentioned, I'm a television packaging agent, and my day job is representing writers I don't care about and putting them on shows I don't care about. My passion is representing faith brands, and I discovered years ago that I'm going to go out and I'm going to sign brands in the space, take intellectual properties, books, life rights, package them and sell them as scripted series, non-scripted series. And I represent everybody from Kirk Franklin to Karen Kingsbury to Steve Arterburn, Henry Cloud, John Townsend, and we've been very successful in also representing showrunners in that space as well. And Dean is a half-hour showrunner, but everybody from Martha Williamson to a number of others. And because I'm that outed packaging agent, and mostly thanks to Mark Burnett, who's kind of blazed this trail, which is why I say we're all here for such a time as this. I'm on the advisory board of Variety's Rogers and Cowan's Faith and Family Values Conference, and so is Simon. And it's interesting because just to have Variety and Rogers and Cowan recognize faith content enough to have a summit, an industry summit about it, is miraculous. I happen to moderate a panel that I think is the most important because I invite all of the network buyers, and these are secular buyers, the top producers, network buyers, on a panel, and we kind of unpack, all of the tough questions. And every year I get calls from all the network heads of drama at NBC, ABC, CBS, and they'll say, Michael, we want to develop a series aimed at the Bible audience. And every time my eyes roll back in my head, and I ask the question, do they really know what they're talking about, number one? Number two, can they protect their brand and at the same time, develop a show for that audience? And every year the answer is they have absolutely no idea. In fact, they wouldn't know a successful series aimed at our audience if it smacked them over the head. So fast forward to my example. I represent one of the show running teams I represent that are just born-again, spirit-filled believers, are John Sackmar and Carrie Linhart. They wrote a spec pilot that I would describe as a contemporary touch by an angel. It's a spiritual procedural in the vein of Crash. There's angels, demons. In a sense, it's a Frank Peretti kind of it surfaces really how angels and demons respond to real-life humans. And I went out with the script with some other various producers that have deals at various networks and studios last summer, and I got nothing but passes. Part of representing Faith Brands, I met Mark and Roma. They knew that I was kind of the television packaging version of what they were doing. I met with them at their home in Malibu last Christmas. I brought John and Carrie there. Roma read the script Unveiled, which is this script. She loved it and said, this is the next contemporary touch by an angel. And we brought Mark Burnett involved because we realized that all the executives are afraid of their jobs and they need this kind of 800-pound gorilla who's known as he gets the audience. If he's attached and the show doesn't succeed, my job's safe. So we attached Mark and Roma. And because Mark is such a huge deal at NBC, we realized it's kind of one-stop shopping. And my secular claim to fame is I packaged Dexter, which branded Showtime. I worked with Perlina Ibakwe, who was a Showtime executive, who's now the head of drama at NBC. So Perlina and I have a shorthand. And Mark brought the script to Jen Sulky, Bob Greenblatt, the number one and number two at the network. And they took 2 weeks to read it. And a month ago, they passed on the script. I was floored, devastated, and more than that, John and I had been praying about this, and we knew that it was God's will that this thing get set up. With the journey that we had been on, we went into warfare prayer and literally started thanking God for the victory, the work that he's prepared in advance, that this was already sold. And even though it wasn't manifest in the natural, we knew that it was going to sell. I had conversations with Mark Burnett's team, and simultaneously, Mark called Bob Greenblatt, and I went to Perlina Ibakwe, and and obviously Mark's influence much more than my influence, but I said, Perlina, we know each other. We packaged Dexter. Every year you come to me and you say that you want to develop a series that's aimed at this audience. You don't know how to develop it. You've got me telling you this is it. You've got Mark Burnett telling you this is it. Pick it up. Put it in development, have John and Carrie come in with Mark and Roma. They'll lay out the entire first season, and come up fronts in May, I'll make you look very, very good. Well, not only did they pick it up, but now Mark has a guaranteed pilot commitment, and he's attached it to Unveiled, so it's going to be shot as a pilot. So please pray, because in my world, it's not a volume game, and we need more networks. We need to score more, not just in the broadcast space, but also, I think, to prove everybody's point here, that there's an edgy cable series that is aimed at our audience that also we can sell as well, because it doesn't involve the advertisers, and that's a whole nother topic with the advertisers and faith content. But anyway, that's my story, and please do pray for that project. It's called Unveiled. Oh, here.
Do you have a quick story? We're going to run out of time to pray. Yes, we need to pray.
We can pray.
You got a minute? No? You're okay?
I work with people. Every day I talk to people, I pray with people. My actors have to decide whether to take a job or not take a job. And I pray, and that's what I tell them. I say, let's pray, let's figure it out. And we pray that God will close doors and God will open doors, and He always does. So that's how my faith.
Amen.
All right, we need to pray for these people. First of all, I'll give you time to clap because they're awesome, and I want them to know that. But. All right, Kathy's going to explain how we're going to do this. You guys, she's going to put you across the room. People are going to lay hands on you and pray for you. So you explain what you want.
Are you about to explode? This is why we're here. This is why we're here. I want you to know that this is my 5th time having the privilege of hearing Terry and Dean speak. And I'll tell you how them being in Hollywood changed people's lives. It's because of those 2 men that all of you are here today. That's how he changes lives. Hearing them talk about pushing back darkness, what a good day looked like to them, what a victory looked like to them, made me understand that Hollywood doesn't need more critics, it needs more intercessors. It changed my heart, it changed my life, it changed ministry, and I went crawling. NPC and your board has been here twice over the last 5 years praying, and it made me go beg Shirley and the staff to come to Hollywood for the summons. And so that's what people like this do in changing lives. And so they love to be prayed over. They're excited you're here to pray, and we're not going to stand up here and go, thank you, Lord, for Dean Batali. We are going to get them down around the seats, and you guys are going to engulf them. What I am going to ask is that you let each other pray. So while you're praying, pray in the Spirit, but pray 2, 3, 4 sentences and be done and let someone else pray, because we're going to pray for a while, okay? So, Sandy Albright, do you see her? Will you go stand right back with Sandy? Thank you. You're stuck up here. Rick and Vicky, will you stand, please? Rick, right? Rex, I'm sorry, Rex, will you stand? Will you go stand right in the middle of that room with them and prepared to be bombarded in prayer? We're going to war. We're going to war. All right, thank you so much. Larry Noble, will you raise your hand? Larry and Cindy, will you go stand back in that area with them? William, will you raise your hand? Simon, will you go stand with them? Lisa Crump, will you raise your hand? Terry, will you go stand? If your table is anywhere near these people that are standing, I'm going to ask you, if at all possible, get up and move. Lay hands on them. Bless them. I hope you've been taking notes. I hope you heard that they have families, that they have spouses, that they have children in college, they have real life financial needs, they have temptation, they have doubt. Dave Butts and I will continue once in a while. If we hear a lull in the prayer, we will give you a prompt. But other than that, take them to the throne room.